Hey everybody, my name is Mike Sparks. Welcome to the first episode of the Sparklepony Roundup. That's all the introductions I'm going to do for now because there's a lot of things to talk about this particular episode because within the last 2 weeks we have had some huge announcements from Blizzard, especially regarding the raid system and the bold solution they promised us for low population realms. Now, first thing I'm going to get into is the flex rate system. I think everybody's been buzzing about that for the last 2 weeks, and it is quite the announcement. Unless you've been living under a rock lately, the way that works is any raid size from 10 to 25 can now queue up for a portion of the Siege of Orgrimmar raid, starting in 5.4, and clear through the content at a scaled difficulty level. So if you have 11 people, an ability might shoot 3 people, and if you have 25, it'll shoot like 5 or 6 people. That's not the greatest example of how this is going to work, but it's the best I could come up with at the moment. Now, a lot of people are going crazy because they're like, oh my god, it's another level on top of everything else we've already got to do with the heroic dungeons and the look for raid and then the normal mode raiding, and if you're in one of those guilds, the heroic mode raiding. So there's 4 levels of raiding, almost put up 3 there, and you know, the regular dungeons on top of that, which yes, at this point they're a joke, but we still do them for the valor, or most of us do anyway. That's something that ends up being up to you. But they're not really looking at it the way that I personally am looking at it, and the way a lot of other people are looking at it, which is, yeah, it's something else to do, but it's something else to do. If you don't want to do look for raid, you don't have to anymore. You can just wait to watch somebody You can just wait to watch somebody put up one of these flex raid pugs in trade chat and go do that instead. And then you don't have to deal with the people that are just standing there. You don't have to deal with the people that are purposely doing the boss wrong. You don't have to deal with the people that are sitting there flexing their EP because they're just nuking the boss instead of the ads when it's an ad fight. Those sort of things are no longer something that you are forced to deal with the way that you were dealing with them in LFR, because let's face it, nobody seems to kick anybody in LFR for any reason anymore. Basically, somebody has to like go on a racist tirade to get thrown out of an LFR these days, and that's a little ridiculous. I remember Dragon Soul, if somebody didn't know the fight and they were purposely doing it wrong, they were gone within 1 to 2 attempts. Now, they'll just keep going, and that's not the way this game is supposed to be played, people. And I will be getting into the community aspects of things a little bit later when I talk about the virtual realms. But what I'm trying to get at is the only people that are really going to be affected by this extra layer are the people that insist on doing everything, which are generally the more hardcore players. The majority of us don't play on that kind of level, and for us, this is just going to be a nice alternative. Now, what it's not an alternative for is normal mode raiding. And I want to stress that because everybody keeps talking about how this is going to be a great thing for the friends and family guilds. And really, when you think about it, it's not, because the friends and family guilds want to still feel like they're doing actual progression, and this is not going to be counted in actual progression. You know, I was a guild master of one of these friends and family guilds up until very recently. I led it from the end of Wrath of the Lich King up until now here in Mists of Pandaria. In the middle of Throne of Thunder, we kind of fell apart, mostly because we couldn't get the people to go raid. And there's 2 reasons that the friends and family guilds are not going to be helped by the flex raid. The first is the fact that, as I stated, it is outside of the progression path. It is something that's considered lesser. The second thing is, a lot of these friends and family guilds, while yes, they have an active raid roster of about 12 to 16 people, problem for them isn't that they can't go do 25 mans because they don't have enough people. It's because their people aren't reliable enough to even get a full 10-man together most nights. And this is not just speaking from my own personal experience. I've talked to a lot of guilds of that type on my server because we were looking for people to merge with, and they were all having this same problem. The game these days is just made to be too casual, and people aren't really dedicated to showing up on raid night the way they used to be. And I don't know if there's a way to fix that. It's definitely not going to be fixing it with flex raid, but that's my opinion. I could be totally wrong, and we could find all these people showing up every night because now they know that they're going to have a raid spot. So we'll see how that ends up panning out, but ultimately I don't think this is going to end up helping the friends and family casual guilds as much as Blizzard was hoping they will, as much as everybody keeps implying it's going to. Now, the other big thing that we really want to talk about is the virtual realms, and this is also going to factor into those problems and those solutions. Now, Blizzard, when Mists of Pandaria hit, promised us that we were going to see a bold and innovative solution to the low population realm problem. And when they said that, everybody figured that that was going to be the CRZ technology. The CRZ technology has really probably caused more complaints than it has solutions at this point, because nobody gets to kill their rare spawns. Hunters get frustrated because they can't get their fancy pets because they're already tamed or dead. People are having problems leveling up their professions because everybody's fighting over the same ore and herbs now. And it's a little bit of a headache, to say the least. Now, lo and behold to us, this last week, they go and they announce Virtual Realms, which is basically an entire battle group that's been CRZ'd together, even in Pandaria and in the city. Because for those of you that weren't aware of how CRZ technology works, right now it does not apply in the cities, it does not apply in Pandaria. I think you can phase a friend into Pandaria if you're in the same group, but that's about it. You don't just randomly see some guy from another server because he's in Krasarang Wilds and so are you. They did that to help people get through the current expansion, less competition for mobs. They also did that because people don't want to get ganked necessarily as they're leveling more than they already do. So thankfully, there's a PvE and PvP separation on that, which, again, I think some of the more casual players don't realize. But I'm kind of digressing into a tangent there, so I'm going to get back to the points that I was going to make. Now, the virtual realm is similar to a merged battle group. Now, I'm not going to say it is a merged battle group because they're trying to balance the server populations, and obviously if two very populated servers are on the same battle group, they're not going to want to incorporate both of them into the same virtual realm, because that would just be an absolute overload on everybody. Imagine Ogremar with Thrall and Mal'Ganis both in it. I think everybody's computer would crash. Now, the really cool thing about the virtual realms that we didn't see with the regular CRZ and with the battle tag system is the fact that we are now going to have a cross-server auction house and a cross-server guilds. So if I'm playing on Terralion, that's where the majority of my tunes are, and I've got a friend over on, I don't know, like Velen. I know that place is pretty much a ghost town these days, and he ends up with his realm in my virtual realm. He can now join my guild. Now that is really cool, and it's going to be a nice solution for a lot of those friends and family guilds that have other people that would join their guild if they could just afford the server transfer, provided that contingency that that server actually ends up in the virtual realm. Because I don't know if they're going to make that available outside of the collapses or sections, or I don't even know what we're going to call them. Maybe like nodes of realms that they're going to group together. And it's going to be really interesting to see the impact that that has on the actual community. Because, back in the days of Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, when we actually had to assemble our own groups, and we had to wait 15 minutes to get into Burning Crusade Heroics, and we liked it. Honestly, it's probably about the same now. That people kind of overstate the waiting. Yeah, sometimes you ended up there all day in order to do, like, heroic Shattered Halls. It took me a second to think of the name of that place. I've blocked it from my mind. It was horrible. But for the most part, if you were going to go do Slave Pens or something, or Alcatraz, actually I think a lot of people hated Alcatraz. I think I was the one that liked it. But, a lot of those heroics, people jumped at the chance to get in. Others, not so much. It's kind of the same way in Wrath. Everybody wanted to go do heroic Halls of Lightning. Nobody wanted to go do heroic Halls of Stone, or what was the other one everybody hated? Halls of Reflection was bad, but at that point we were all so LFD entwined that it wasn't a big deal. I want to say it was one of the Karaji ones. Anyway, I'm drawing a blank. The point is, we all knew who the bads were. I hate using that word, but that's basically what it came down to, is we all knew the people that, did less DPS than our battle pets. We all knew the people that stood in the fire. We all knew the people that played awesome but were total jerks, so we wouldn't take them anyway. We knew those people. And now, with the way things are and the way the game has been so individualized, we tend to not know that anymore. Heck, I don't even know anybody on my server outside of my guild these days. And that's because of the way the game has evolved. And it seems like Blizzard is trying to peel that back now. And I, for one, appreciate it. I mean, they tried to start doing it with the challenge modes, but the challenge modes didn't take off the way that they were hoping. So it didn't really have much of an effect. Now we're starting to see it a little more with the heroic scenarios, because granted, it's only 3 people, but you have to find 3 people to go. And a lot of people are keeping that in guild, but if you don't have that option, you're already starting to learn the people that you want to pug in and the people you don't want to pug in. But with the combination of the flex raid system and the virtual realms, we're going to start to get to know a lot more people again, because we're going to be forced to interact with them. Well, not necessarily forced, but if you're planning to get the full experience of the game, you're going to have to interact with these people. Now, this may help establish, once again, the server identity that we used to have, because it used to be like, oh yeah, I'm from Area 52, and everybody knew what that meant. Nowadays, that's just another little thing that we see and nobody really regards. It's kind of like the story mode, or it's kind of like the backstory behind a dungeon. It's there, but most people don't pay attention to it at all anymore. They're not interested in why are we killing these things, or just killing these things. Now, it's going to wreak havoc on the old server races, but I think at this point, those server races have kind of been demolished anyway, because it's usually the same few guilds up in the top 10 on every server now, and not a lot of change unless one of those guilds breaks up. So now what we might be looking at is virtual realm competition for those people that like that immediate progression race without having to do all the considerations for world first. And I mean, most of us don't play on that level anyway, so the server rank is our consolation prize generally. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, because the game is so individualized these days. We don't really see a lot of interaction between the LFR and the LFD, and the way that they've gotten rid of the group quests. I'm not complaining that they've gotten rid of the group quests, because I think a lot of us never bothered to do them because it was such a pain to get a group in the first place. But with all of that content altered the way that it's been altered, we don't really have a lot of motivation to seek out other players anymore. And with things like the Flex Raid and things like the heroic scenarios that are already in place, we have more of a motivation to go talk to somebody else now. And that's kind of nice. I miss that sense of this is the community I play in, and this is the guild I play in, instead of how nowadays it's pretty much just, this is where I play on this server, I am in this guild, and that's the extent of what we acknowledge. I don't know if that made sense, because I think I just basically said the same thing backwards with different emphasis. But I hope you get what I was trying to get at there. I think that's the second time I've said that about something. But once again, this is the first episode. I'm still going to be a little stumbly, and I apologize for that. And I appreciate if you've been bearing with me for this long, because I think it's probably been a good 15-20 minutes of me rambling now. I might be overestimating that, because I have a very poor sense of the passage of time. So that's really my 2 bits on these. I'll probably watch back through, and I might add some little cliff notes next week. But that's where it stands right now. I don't know exactly what to think of either of these. I'm hoping for the best. It looks like they're both going to be assets to the game rather than detriments, but we're just really going to have to see how that actually ends up playing out. You know, a lot of people are speculating that the flex raid system might actually end up replacing the look for raid system in future content. Obviously it won't in 5.4 because it's something that brand new that they're rolling out, and they don't want to put the shiny new thing as the end-all alternative, meaning there is no other alternative now. Once again, I don't think I phrased that the best. They don't want to take out something that's working for something that's potentially broken, essentially. But in the future expansions, whatever comes after Pandaria, a lot of people are thinking that this might end up being the end of the Look for Raid, because a lot of us feel that this is what Look for Raid should have always been. It should have been the same content with watered down mechanics instead of basically non-existent mechanics. Now, we've seen a little bit more of mechanics that can actually kill you in LFR and Throne of Thunder, but it's still not really enough. Content is basically just loot pinatas, and that's not really the way that we should be raiding, even in a queuable environment. Now, what I'd be more interested to see, because 4 layers of raids is really difficult to manage for the hardcore players, and for those of us that do choose to do everything, is going to be, will Flex Raid end up replacing anything at all, or will it replace LFR, or will it replace normal mode? Because I could see that happening in my mind, because normal mode is a mode that's almost non-existent these days. Like I said before, the friends and family guilds are getting stonewalled out of it, either by their own attendance or the fact that it's tuned to be hard enough to slow down the heroic raiders from clearing all the content in one day. But because the friends and family guilds and the 10-man guilds that aren't doing heroics don't have that gear, they're getting stuck on bosses like Horadon and bosses like Duramu, if they're getting that far, and bosses like Tortos that have really high DPS requirements while managing a mechanic. That's something that's really, really hard for them right now. And something like the Flex Raid system might be a nice alternative for them to still get in there, get in the progression, but not just be absolutely overwhelmed. I mean, let's face it, at this point, the heroic mode guilds, they clear everything out in a couple of days anyway. I don't know if we really need to keep tuning everything to be that high when it comes out. I think that is what the heroic mode content is for, and it seems superfluous to me to make the normal modes also really difficult. And I know that's subjective. A lot of people didn't have problems with Horadon, a lot of people didn't have problems with Tortos, but if you look at where progression is and which bosses people are getting stuck on the most, it shows you a pattern. And a lot of people are saying right now that guild progression is an all-time low, and it's not. It's lowest it's been since Ulduar. I loved Ulduar, but man, there were some difficult bosses in there. It's kind of ironic that that is the comparison, because I remember when Throne of Thunder was coming out, everybody compared it to Ulduar, and it's turned out to be a lot more similar than we thought in actual gameplay. Yes, the story is, for the most part, very different. It does end with an Old God cliffhanger if you're playing Heroic, and if you don't already know that, sorry for the spoiler, but it's still pretty vague, so go hunt down a Raden video, because at this point, if you haven't seen Raden, it's unlikely you're going to. But they're very similar instances in a lot of ways. They're both very big, they're both very expansive, they're both very pretty, there's a lot of towers everywhere, and people are getting stuck in about the same rate. When Ulduar was done, when the tier was done, I think we had about maybe like 9,500 Yogg-Saron kills. And actually, that was when Wrath of the Lich King was done. And right now, halfway through the tier on Throne of Thunder, actually, I don't know if it's accurately halfway through, because we don't know when 5.4 is going to hit. I'm still hoping it's going to be a while, because I'd like to get some more progress in on TOT myself. But right now we're sitting, I think, at about like 6,000 Lei Shen kills. And the Raden kills, while I don't recall offhand, they're pretty abysmally low. And so there's time that we can catch that up. And it won't be the worst tier since, like, Burning Crusade. But it's still not going to be a strong progression tier. I mean, we're looking at coming off of an expansion where we had like 60,000 Deathwing kills, and we're seeing like a tenth of that now. Granted, we haven't seen Garrosh yet, and Garrosh is the actual end boss. More people tend to come back for that tier, so that may end up improving. But right now, looking at Shah of Fear kills, looking at Lei Shen kills, this is a pretty low expansion for raiding, and I'm hoping that the Flex Raid fixes that. Even if it doesn't replace either of the modes, it might at least give people the gear they need so that they can get through those early gear checks like Horadon, which I know I keep going back to. A lot of people didn't really have a problem with that boss. That's where my guild was stonewalling. I've pugged further than that, sadly. And I think I lost myself again, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below on the YouTube. Even though it is a great detriment to mental sanity, I will be doing the best I can to read through those comments. If you want to make sure your question or comment actually gets seen so I can address it next week, or if you even want it addressed next week, make sure to actually get a hold of me somewhere else. Twitter is probably the best place. It's twitter.com/ponyzord. I'm also making a Tumblr, I think, but I haven't quite ironed that out yet. I want to get that all set up across the board so it's only one name to remember. But yeah, go ahead and tweet me. Send me a message over there. Put it down in the comment below for now. Those are going to be the best ways. And since I am kind of falling apart right now, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye.